Hey everybody, so this is a video that's been a long time coming. We referenced our cold and flu tea when we did our collecting, dehydrating, preserving pine tip video, which we'll make sure we leave a link to. And we are now at that time of the year where we need to get our mullein and our goldenrod collected before they pass by. So here we have a first year mullein. And you can tell it's a first year because it doesn't have the big stalk that comes up with all the flowers on it. Unfortunately, we have gotten to the time of year where the mature plants have already gone by. So we're focusing our collection on our first year mullein. And this one happens to be surrounded by some other useful items, like we have our wood sorrel and we have our jewelweed. But our focus today is on the mullein. So mullein is a super soft leaf. It's got kind of a furry feel to it. Anybody who's familiar with lamb's ear sometimes confuses lamb's ear with mullein. But mullein is a very different plant than your lamb's ear, and the flowers are very different. And we'll show you a picture of what the flower looks like. So today we're going to be harvesting leaves from these plants. Now, harvesting the leaves doesn't hurt the plants at all, and as long as you don't disturb the roots, they'll be fine. These like to grow in fringe areas. You see them very often along the side of the road or in areas where woods and gravelly areas meet. Now, we've got a plethora of these first year plants all in this area, and if you notice, with all of these, we know that means that last year we had a second year plant that dropped seed. So next year we'll have even more here that we can collect if we want to. So let me get some more of these collected. I've got a little bunch here, and I'll be back with you in just a few minutes. So now we're going to collect our goldenrod. The best time to collect your goldenrod is when the flowers are out, because it makes for an easier identification of the plant. Now you can collect both the flowers and the leaves. We use just the leaves, so let me get these collected so we can add them to the mix. So we've collected our mullein and we've collected our goldenrod. Now I've washed everything up, which is something you should always do. And then the goldenrod I've taken off the stems and put onto the dehydrator trays. So I'm using my Excalibur food dehydrator today, and we'll be doing these on our herb setting, which is at 95 degrees. So before I put these into the dehydrator, I just want to show you quickly. If you look at the underside of the leaves, the center vein that goes through, a lot of people will take and cut the leaf off that because especially on the really big leaves, this can be very tough and large. On the smaller leaves, it's not so bad. I usually leave it there. This leaf, you can see this center piece is a lot bigger than on the other one, but I can always break that off later after it's dehydrated as well. Now, both of these, the mullein and the goldenrod, I use just the leaves. Both plants have medicinal purposes with leaves and flowers, but for this purpose, we're just using the leaves. So with the dehydrator all loaded, now we're going to, again, we're going to set these at 95 degrees, which is our herb setting. We're going to get these dehydrated, and then I'll be back. So now that we have our ingredients all dehydrated, what we're going to start off with is our mullein. And again, like I say every time, make sure when you're collecting any kind of ingredients that you're doing it in an area that you know is safe and hasn't had any spray, any chemicals on it. Everything we collect is from our own yard, so we know what has and hasn't been done in the area. So mullein, like the rest of the ingredients, can be used fresh or dehydrated. Now, we're dehydrating it because each of these ingredients have a season, and we want to be able to use this at any time of the year. So dehydrating it for us is the best way to store it. So with the mullein, when you dehydrate it, you want to make sure that it's nice and dry and that it makes a crunching sound when you break it up, because you don't want anything that is moist in your jars to make mold. So you want the mullein to be very dry when you do it. So what I'm going to do is just break this up. It doesn't have to be in really small pieces, especially if you're going to use like a tea baller or something to do this. Now, why do we use mullein? We use mullein because its flowers and its leaves are anodyne, antiseptic, astringent, and an expectorant. So the leaves are often used to fight influenza, herpes viruses, and some bacteria that causes respiratory infections. Now, we do it in a tea, which is what is commonly used, and it's used as a tea often to treat various respiratory issues, including asthma, bronchitis, and throat irritations. So you can see I'm not breaking it up super fine, but I also wanted to show you, as I mentioned, when I was putting them in the dehydrator, some of the leaves do have a much thicker main piece on the back, the vein that runs up the center of the leaf. Very easy to just break the dehydrated leaf off that. I just put these to the side. Technically, depending on how you're going to brew this, you could leave those on, but for me, it's just much easier to take them off. So before I move on to our goldenrod, I just wanted to also make a mention, though I don't have any of the flowers here today, you can use the flowers either fresh or dried in a mixture with olive oil for treatment of earaches, boils, and sores. So the next thing we're going to do is our goldenrod. Now, just like with the mullein, it can be used fresh or it can be used dehydrated. It can be used by itself or in conjunction with other herbs. So just like with the mullein, you want to make sure when it's dehydrated that it's nice and dry. Again, no wet ingredients because you don't want to cause mold. Now, one interesting thing about goldenrod is very well known by its bright yellow flowers. So a lot of people have allergies at the time of year goldenrod is out, but many people don't realize one big thing that causes allergies is ragweed, which grows side by side with goldenrod, is in bloom at the same time of the year. And the goldenrod can actually be used to create a tea to help counteract the allergic reaction caused by ragweed. So I've got them all dehydrated, and you can hear they crunch as you break them up. Again, I'm not going to break them into super fine powder, just break them up. But while I'm doing that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about goldenrod itself. So goldenrod is a premier decongestant, and it's used to help with upper respiratory congestion that may be caused by allergies, sinusitis, flu, or even the common cold. Many people use it as a tea, but you can also do a syrup or a tincture out of the goldenrod, and it's one of the strongest herbs for drying sinuses and relieving sinus pain and congestion, which is why we use it in our tea. So sometimes it's also used as a diuretic, an antimicrobial, and an anti-inflammatory for people having urinary tract infections. And it's also been used to quell diarrhea because of its tannins and its antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory actions. So let me get this crushed up and I'll be right back. So the final component for our cold and flu tea is pine needles. Now, we've made a complete video about pine needle tea. We'll make sure we leave a link to that in the description. But we collect our pine needles in the spring. We prefer to collect the tips as they're coming out before they actually open up. But you can use the needles, you can use the tips, you can use them fresh, you can use them dehydrated. Pine needle tea has a lot of great uses on its own, but it just adds to our cold and flu mix some very important properties. So we're using pine tips, and you can use pine tips, you can use the regular needles, you can do them, like I said, either fresh or dehydrated, just like any of the other ingredients. Now, we collected these pine tips in the spring and dehydrated them, and we've made pine needle tea on its own, but now it's time for us to prep for the fall. So why are we putting these pine needles in our tea? It's because they are super rich in vitamin C, actually 5 times the concentration of the vitamin C you find in lemons. And vitamin C is an immune system booster, which is why pine needle tea, even on its own, is used to help fight illness and infections. So the tea is also used as an expectorant for coughs. It helps relieve chest congestion, respiratory problems. But pine needles are also high in antioxidants and vitamin A. So vitamin A is good for your eyesight, improves hair and skin regeneration, and improves red blood cell production as well. So now we've got our pine needles ready. Let's move on to getting our mix made. So what we're going to do is combine approximate equal amounts of the 3 ingredients, the pine needles, the goldenrod, and the mullein. So it doesn't have to be exact. This is not something that you have to weigh or measure in a measuring cup. Just by eye, approximate equal amounts. So we're going to put in our pine needles. We're going to put in our goldenrod. And we're going to put in our mullein. And very simply, we just mix them all together. Now, if you see anything that's got large pieces that you still want to break up, you can do that. And then just continue to mix it till it's fairly well blended. Okay, so now I'm going to get this into the jars. But while I'm putting it in the jars, I will kind of go over with you how, when I make it, I do it, and what things we add into it. Now, before I do that, I just want to say that this tea actually is a very good tasting tea, just on its own, without any added sweetener. A lot of people think, oh, it must taste, you know, kind of green and like a Christmas tree. Well, it doesn't. It has kind of a citrusy, lemony flavor, not an orange flavor, but just very citrusy. And it has a pleasant taste to it. So with that, you can add sugar. If you prefer not to use sugar, you can add honey, which is what we do. Sometimes we add dehydrated stevia leaves to it, or stevia syrup, just if we need that extra sweetener, or if we're taking it because we've got a cold and have a little bit of a sore throat, the honey actually does help. Now, we use local honey, which has its own benefits as well. When we make it, sometimes we'll use a tea baller if we're going to make just an individual cup, but most of the time we're making it by the pot, and we actually put a filter into our regular Mr. Coffee maker and make an entire pot of tea, and that way we have it to drink throughout the day. You can also make this in the summer cold, just as a immune booster drink, and it's actually really delicious on ice. So now I have it all jarred up. You'll notice I'm using my vintage canning jars, which I do for most things that are herbal. For me, the reason behind that is these still store fine. I can still get the rubber gaskets for these. They keep things airtight. The most important thing is keeping these airtight so they don't get moist and start rehydrating on your shelf and then grow mold. So if you're really concerned, if you're using a jar that doesn't have a really good seal, or you're concerned that it may still have a little bit of air going on in there, you can always add a silica gel pack to this. Now, the pint-sized jars we normally do as gifts, and the quart-sized jars we'll keep for ourselves. But this will get us through easily until next year, and then we can start collecting more to make our next batches. So that's it for our cold and flu tea video. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to give us a thumbs up, share it with people you think might enjoy the video or on your social media, and hit that notification bell if you want to be notified when our next video is out. If you'd like to see more videos like this or have ideas on what you'd like to see us make videos of, please remember, leave a message in the comments below the video. We'd love to hear from you and we'll definitely answer you back. Until next time, bye.